This video is brought to you by True Tales of Buried Treasure, the largest collection of old treasure magazines in the West. On our website, you can search for individual treasure stories by region, or buy our original magazines themselves. To pay us a visit, please click on the link in the description. Enjoy. As the Wells Fargo stagecoach rattled and bounced along the rugged road out of Weaverville, California, an estimated $50,000 in gold lay securely inside a strongbox, destined for the company's vault in Redding. But fate had other plans. A violent ambush left blood on the trail, the gold vanished, and the treasure was never seen again. To this day, it is believed that the gold remains hidden, likely buried somewhere in the mountains beneath the abandoned ruins of Shasta, waiting for a determined treasure hunter to uncover it. The fateful journey began on a bright Saturday afternoon, May 14, 1892. The Wells Fargo stagecoach departed the quiet mining town of Weaverville as scheduled, making its way toward Redding 50 miles away. Aboard the coach were the driver, John Boyce, the armed guard, Buck Montgomery, and a lone passenger, George Suhr. Suhr disliked the dust and confinement of the coach's interior, so Montgomery agreed to swap seats with him. Suhr rode up top beside Boyce while Montgomery sat inside, his shotgun resting across his lap. By late afternoon, they had covered nearly 40 miles and were descending from the mountains toward Shasta, with only a few miles left to Redding. The journey had been uneventful, and there was no reason to expect trouble until they passed a mile beyond Shasta. As the stage maneuvered along the twisting, narrow road, a lone figure suddenly leaped from the roadside, shotgun in hand. He aimed the weapon directly at Boyce's midsection and barked a chilling command: "Throw down the box." Caught off guard, Boyce and Suhr had little choice but to comply. Inside the coach, Montgomery remained unseen, carefully positioning himself to strike when the moment was right. The heavy strongbox was hauled out and tossed to the ground. The bandit's eyes followed its descent, just the distraction Montgomery had been waiting for. He fired. The shotgun blast ripped through the bandit's face and chest. He staggered backward, blood spraying as he reflexively pulled his own trigger. His aim was off, but the shotgun pellets tore into the legs of both Boyce and Suhr. Before anyone could react, a second outlaw sprang from the opposite side of the road. Until that moment, he had remained unseen. Montgomery, still focused on his first target, never saw the second attacker. The hidden gunman raised his revolver and fired. Shot after shot rang out. Montgomery collapsed, riddled with bullets. Blood soaked his clothing as he crumpled to the floor of the coach. The startled horses bolted in terror, the stagecoach careening wildly down the road. Despite their wounds, Boyce and Suhr clung desperately to their seats, trying to regain control. Suhr managed to grab the footbrake with his hands, while Boyce fought the reins, gradually slowing the panicked team. Montgomery, gravely wounded but still alive, struggled to remain conscious. His body was failing, and he knew his injuries were likely fatal. A mile down the road, fate intervened once more. The runaway stage happened upon another carriage, this one carrying a doctor, B.E. Stevenson, and his wife, who were returning from Redding. Stevenson quickly assessed Montgomery's dire condition and directed the stage toward the nearest hotel at Lone Creek. Once there, Montgomery was carried to a room where the doctor worked feverishly to save him. But his wounds were severe, and time was slipping away. Meanwhile, the gold was gone, vanished into the wilderness. To this day, it remains a mystery, hidden somewhere in the remote hills, waiting for fortune seekers to uncover its long-lost secret. In a nearby room, doctors tended to the gunshot wounds in the legs of Boyce and Suhr. Meanwhile, word was sent to Shasta, summoning Montgomery's wife and 2 young children. As they rushed toward his bedside, they unknowingly passed the very spot where he had been ambushed. By the time they arrived, 2.5 hours later, they were just in time to witness his final moments. 1 man was dead, 2 were gravely wounded. But what of the robbers? And what became of the $50,000 in gold? As the panicked horses thundered away with the runaway stage, the wounded outlaw, Charlie Ruggles, lay writhing on the ground. Montgomery's shotgun blast had all but destroyed his face. Blood streamed through his trembling fingers as he clutched at the ruin of his features. It ran down his shirt, pooling in the dirt beneath him. John Ruggles, his older brother, wasted no time. Holstering his pistol, he dashed across the road, grabbed Charlie's battered body, and dragged him into the brush. Then, turning his attention to the prize, he smashed open the strongbox with a swift blow from his axe, tore out the canvas bags filled with gold, and assessed the grim situation. Charlie was in bad shape. Too far gone, John reckoned. The younger Ruggles wouldn't last long. Without hesitation, John stripped Charlie of anything that might identify him, loaded the gold onto a stolen horse, and vanished into the wilderness. By nightfall, a hastily assembled posse from Reading reached the crime scene, but a light rain had begun to fall, masking any trace of the outlaws' trail. The abandoned strongbox lay in the mud, empty. There was nothing more to be done until daylight. At dawn, the posse resumed their search, combing the forested slopes for any sign of the wounded bandit. If he was still alive, he couldn't have made it far. Hours passed with little progress. Just as the day faded into evening, they finally found him. Charlie Ruggles lay slumped at the bottom of a wooded ravine, barely clinging to life. His blood-caked clothes were in tatters, his face unrecognizable. The wounds in his throat had rendered him mute, and his breath came in shallow, rasping gasps. For the next 2 weeks, he was kept under constant watch at a makeshift infirmary in Reading. His brother had done a thorough job stripping him of any identification, and with his throat too damaged to speak, the authorities had no way of knowing who he was. Wells Fargo detectives scoured their records, sifting through possible identities for the prisoner. One by one, their leads dried up, except for one. The name Charles L. Ruggles surfaced, a known troublemaker who had worked at a nearby copper and silver mine. If this was indeed Charles Ruggles, then his brother John, an ex-convict and lifelong outlaw, was the missing second bandit. But where had John disappeared? Lawmen spread out searching for any trace of him. The authorities soon learned that the Ruggles brothers had an aunt living 10 miles south, near Woodland. She was alerted and agreed to cooperate should John seek refuge with her. 5 weeks after the robbery on June 19th, John Ruggles appeared at her doorstep. He claimed to be out of work and in need of food and rest. His aunt, however, had no sympathy. She turned him away and immediately sent word to the local deputy sheriff. Later that evening, the hunt for John Ruggles ended in a small restaurant in Woodland. As he sat eating supper, the deputy approached. "You're under arrest, John Ruggles," the officer declared. John went for his gun, but he was too slow. The deputy's bullet struck him in the neck, dropping him where he sat. When he was searched, authorities found $700 in gold in his pockets, just a fraction of the stolen treasure. After 2 days of medical care, John was on his feet again and was transported to Reading, where he joined his brother in jail. As they sat in their cells recovering from their wounds, John began plotting their courtroom defense. Ever the schemer, he formulated a plan. Their strategy would be simple: shift the blame. And the scapegoat? Buck Montgomery, the very man who had given his life trying to stop them. The Ruggles brothers planned to shift the blame entirely onto Buck Montgomery. They would claim that he had masterminded the robbery, tipping them off about the gold shipment and positioning himself inside the stagecoach to ensure the plan went smoothly. If the jury believed their story, they hoped for leniency, especially given their injuries. Handsome and persuasive, John Ruggles was confident in his ability to sell the tale. But the scheme unraveled when word of their defense leaked to the public through their attorney. The people of Reading were outraged. Buck Montgomery was a respected man, known for his integrity and hard work. No one in town would stand by while his name was dragged through the mud by criminals trying to escape justice. As the story spread, anger turned to fury. Then, as so often happened in small frontier towns when tempers flared beyond control, the people took matters into their own hands. Just after midnight on Saturday, July 23rd, 2 months after the robbery, a mob of 75 armed men stormed the courthouse and jail. On the 3rd floor, the jailer was roused from sleep and ordered to hand over the keys. Trembling, he stammered that they were locked in the sheriff's safe downstairs. Without hesitation, the mob forced the safe open, seized the keys, and marched back to the cells. At 2 a.m., the iron doors swung open, the Ruggles brothers were dragged out and forced into the streets. With the mob pressing in around them, they were marched through alleys and back roads to a blacksmith shop near the Southern Pacific Railroad's woodshed. There, beneath a thick pine crossbeam used for hoisting wagons, 2 ropes were thrown over. The nooses were placed around their necks. Bound hand and foot, the condemned men were given a chance to speak their last words. For Charlie Ruggles, it was a cruel joke. His throat wounds had left him mute since the day of the holdup. His terrified eyes pleaded for mercy, but he could say nothing. John, however, was not ready to give up. He made a desperate final offer. "Let us go, and I'll tell you where the gold is hidden," he shouted. The mob wasn't interested in bargains. They wanted justice, not treasure. Realizing he was out of options, John made one last plea, not for himself, but for his brother. "Charlie is innocent," he screamed. "Let him go and I'll give you the money." The mob was unmoved. The Ruggles brothers were murderers and their fate was sealed. As the nooses were tightened, John braced himself for the inevitable. The ropes were pulled, feet lifted off the ground, and the brothers kicked in their final moments. With them died the secret of the stolen gold. To this day, no one knows where the fortune went. John Ruggles was the last known person to see the gold after the robbery. When he was captured in Woodland, he had only $700 in his pockets. But before he died, he admitted the rest was hidden, somewhere. The timeline offered plenty of opportunities to stash the treasure. Between the holdup on May 14th and his arrest on June 19th, 5 weeks had passed. The distance between Shasta and Woodland spanned 125 miles, giving him endless places to bury a fortune. That stormy night, after abandoning his wounded brother, John had to be on edge. With 2 horses carrying him and the gold, he could have traveled a significant distance before stopping. But the cold rain and darkness had already concealed his trail. It's likely that he paused after a few hours' ride, waiting out the storm before deciding where to hide the bulk of the treasure. At some point, he must have buried it, keeping only a small amount, perhaps $1,000, to last him until he could return for the rest. But John Ruggles never came back. During their month together in jail, John might have shared the secret with Charlie. But if he did, it didn't matter. The knowledge died with them both on the night of the lynching. Years passed, and Shasta faded into history. Once a thriving town, it slowly crumbled. Its residents moved on, its buildings collapsed, and only the brick skeletons of its former glory remained. At one time, it had boasted the longest row of brick buildings in California. Today, there is little left, but the gold remains. Worth $50,000 when it was buried, its value today would be nearly 10 times that amount. Somewhere, hidden in the hills beneath the ruins of Shasta, the stolen fortune still waits for the right treasure hunter to claim it. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to read the original article or purchase the magazine from which it was taken, please check out our website, truetalesofburiedtreasure.com.